All right, the Bucks. It is Talking Buccaneers with me, Fumane. And if you've watched this channel for any length, I think that's a line that I keep opening every show with now. But really, if you've watched this channel for any length, you'll know that the other thing that I keep saying on this channel is that at some point, Orlando Pirates is going to need to address the problem of the aging midfield. With every passing day, I think that talk is maturing, that conversation is maturing, and I think with every day that passes, we're getting closer and closer to that point where Orlando Pirates is really going to need to look at the issue that's happening at midfield. And I'm going to get into this issue in this particular show. The first thing I want to say is that, this winter transfer, this off-season transfer that we're headed towards is going to have to be a brutal one for Orlando Pirates. And I use that word very intentional. I think Orlando Pirates is going to need to be brutal because of the potential issues that I see arising with not being brutal, but also the issues that I see arising with being brutal as well, especially with the fans. I think there's probably going to be some discontent around the fans with Pirates being, cutthroat and, severing the relationship with some players, which really, it's something that someone like me who's a podcaster feels very uncomfortable to speak about. But I've got to, because if I'm going to be honest with my opinions, if I'm going to be honest with the way that I see things, and then I need to talk about this thing. But it really is hard to talk about the club severing itself from certain relationships with some players, because at the end of the day, we are talking about human beings in these platforms. We talk about people that have careers and are trying to do best for themselves and their families. And so, that language of cut this player off is a hard one when you really think about it, because you're talking about a live human being who might even watch this and be affected by it. But at the end of the day, I think these players get into these careers and are made well aware early on that it is a brutal business, the business of football, and it doesn't always go your way. And especially fans and the club can be brutal towards you, and you've got to have a certain amount of professionalism to accept football decisions as they are, right? So I just want to lay that groundwork first before I get into it. I do want to say that, I'm not necessarily, when I say that this player must go or this player must stay, talking about the human, even though the human aspect of it is important. I think clubs make decisions to keep players at the club for those aspects of things where you find that there's certain dynamics in a club because a certain character is at the club, right? However, I do think that they've got to balance that with whether that decision makes sense footballing wise. And that's what I'm going to get into right now, especially around age concerns for me. And this word that I keep saying again, the continuity of the football club, the continuity of success, and building a sustainable kind of success at the club. So something that's not a secret is that we've got, firstly, I'm going to be looking at 8 midfielders at the club. I'll do my best to remember their names. And if I don't, I'm going to open my laptop and just make sure I get the details right. But we've got 8 midfielders that are playing in Jose Rivero's 4-2-3-1 system in those double pivot, sort of 2 number 6 positions that play there. We've got 8 of those. One of them is out on loan, Goodman Musele. But if I'm going to talk about going forward, and if I'm going to talk about the start of the upcoming season or the transfer window this upcoming June, then I've got to throw Musele in there because he's someone who's going to be returning from loan, right? And I'm just a disclaimer, I'm also going to talk about Talent Mbata, because there's a huge decision to be made there. Well, we know the contract situation there is that he's on loan at Orlando Pirates for 6 months. It's sort of like a trial and audition for 6 months. So Orlando Pirates will then make a decision whether they want to make the transfer permanent. My understanding of that situation is that nothing is solid yet, so they don't have a fee agreed in the contract, in the loan agreement. It's something that Orlando Pirates will have to then, make an offer. And I understand also that SuperSport United are open to listening to other offers around the league. So if Mamelodi Sundowns, for example, come in and they go, we think we want Talent Mbata at Mamelodi Sundowns, then Orlando Pirates are going to have to outbid them, I beg your pardon, or we'd hang our hopes on that Talent Mbata wants to come to the club because of some sort of platform that he would have built for himself at the club, right? So I'm going to throw Talent Mbata into this conversation as well, even though I know you guys know that at the end of this particular season, he initially goes back to SuperSport United before he becomes a Pirates player, if Pirates want to make that happen. So, but I'm going to talk about these 8 midfielders, being 2 of which I've already mentioned. Goodman Musele, who's returning from his loan from Chippa United. Talent Mbata, who's at the club already on loan for the 6 months, which end in June. I beg your pardon. And then Pirates are going to have to make that decision whether to make that transfer permanent. And then there's obviously Siphelelo Baloni, who's already at the club. And then we've got Ndabaithetho Ndlondlo. Remember, I'm talking about people that play in those, have played, or actually players that we know Jose Rivero has used in those positions, those 2 number 6s in front of the defense. So there's Ndabaithetho Ndlondlo, he plays there as well. I mentioned Siphelelo Baloni, I mentioned Talent Mbata and Goodman Musele. So that's 4 of them. There's Fortune Makaringe, who's already at the club, who's also been used at right back, but I think principally he's obviously a midfielder. He's been played in that position. Those 2 number 6s, if you remember at the start of the season, sort of the first 2 games or so, I don't know how many people remember, that he came on a lot as a substitute. Jose Rivero would pull Ndabaithetho Ndlondlo towards the end of the game and then pair Munari with Makaringe in those 2 double pivot positions. So there's Fortune Makaringe, and then we've got Miguel Tim, we've got Thabang Munari, and then we've got Makhehleni Makhala. So these are the 8 people that are going to be in conversation in this show today. So another thing that I want to lay as a groundwork is that I'm someone who thinks that we should be playing the 4-2-3-1. Sorry, not the 4-2-3-1, the 4-3-3 with 1 holding midfielder and 2 number 8s. And I think that would solve a lot of the problems that I'm going to bring to you today on this show. However, I'm going to do a specific show, hopefully tomorrow, talking about that particular thing, you know, whether or not we should be considering playing with 1 holding midfielder instead of 2 holding midfielders, and how that solves a lot of our problems. Now, on today's show, though, I'm talking about particularly the aging of our midfield and sort of solutions going forward that I propose, and more so something you should be thinking about, and I think the club should be thinking about right now. I talked about being brutal, and why I talked about Pirates having to be brutal is that at the start of next season, we've got Makhehleni Makhala, who will be 35 years old. So he's born 1989, I think around November, October, something like that. So he'll be turning 35 at the start of next season. We've got Miguel Tim, who's already turned 32 this season. You've got Thabang Munari, who's also in September going to be turning 35 years old. And then you've got Fortune Makaringe, I think around that time of September as well, or maybe even May. I think Fortune Makaringe will actually be turning 31 years old in May. So I've already counted 4 30-year-olds, right? 2 in their mid-30s, and then 2 sort of in the start of their 30s, right? And then we've got Ndabaithetho Ndlondlo. He's going to be 29 years old at some point this year. I'm not sure when his birthday is going to be, but I know at the start of the season, of next season, which is June, around August time, he's going to be having to turn 29 years old. And then you've got these 3 that I think are of healthy age, which is Talent Mbata, just turned 24 years old now in March. You've got Goodman Musele, who later in the year will be turning 25 years old. I think he's born 1999. And then you've got Siphelelo Baloni, who's also going to be turning 25 years old at some point in this season. Right. So where do I want to start with this? I think the issue that we've got, obviously, it's a pressing need right now, is whether or not we would like to build our midfield again next season, going into next season with, you know, Tim being 32, then having to turn 33 next January. And then we've got Makehleni Makaula, again, who's another one of those crucial players, those important players. He's going to be 35 years old. Thabang Munari, 35 years old, another one of those important players. Particularly these three, not so much Fortune Makaringe, because I think what's happening right now at Orlando Pirates, I mean, this is not necessarily a knock on age. I don't particularly have a problem with, players being of age, sort of in those 30s, 36 years old. I mean, we've got a great example in Luka Modric and sort of Toni Kroos at Real Madrid. My problem is not necessarily the age issue. My problem is specifically having those guys being the crucial starters, being the most important players at the club, because it does mean that at some point when their legs fall off, and it could be next month, it could be in 2 months' time, or it could be in 2 years' time. But if you've got Tim and Makehleni Makaula playing together in that midfield, and they're the sort of regular starters or the star players in the team, that means that at some point you're going to have Makehleni Makaula and Miguel Tim both not playing, and then you're going to need to start from scratch in terms of building that next midfield. That's going to be the midfield of regular starters in the midfield for Orlando Pirates. So that's my particular problem, because when I look at the starting lineup every week, I'm seeing Makehleni Makaula, I'm seeing Thabang Munari, I'm seeing Miguel Tim. Those three names seems like at the moment, those are somewhat of like regular starters at Orlando Pirates. It's very impressive to see, someone like Talent Mbata sort of stake a claim, even though with him there's a caveat and there's a disclaimer that Pirates still have to make an offer, and hoping that SuperSport United are going to agree to that offer. Even Talent Mbata is going to agree to join Orlando Pirates. So that's something that we hope for, right? And so that's the thing that I think is putting me here on this table tonight, talking about this issue of age. Otherwise, if just like at Real Madrid, Modric is not so much of a regular starter anymore, and Toni Kroos is not so much of a regular starter, but they are in and around the club to sort of pass that experience. But the regular starters are your Oriel Chouameni or your Talent Mbata or someone else at Orlando Pirates, then I'm not on this table talking about this. But the particular issue is that I think that those guys who are in their mid-30s are still the regular starters at Orlando Pirates, which means that we have not started building for the next 5 seasons. Maybe not building is not so true, but we're not in that direction. We're not getting closer to having, I mean, I look at a team like Sundowns, and I want us to be Orlando Pirates and not Mamelodi Sundowns. But I do think that we should compliment where they're doing things right, and they're obviously doing things right, hence the results. I mean, if you look at that midfield of Mamelodi Sundowns, something that makes me so envious is that they've got someone like Bongani Zungu, who's been all around the world, and has been, he's been to France, he's been to Scotland, and he's played in big leagues and stuff. And he's a very experienced player, right? And yet he can't get a game because the regular starters at Mamelodi Sundowns, the 27-year-olds, the 26-year-olds, the 23-year-olds, the Marcelo Allende's, are the starters in that team, and they're keeping this experienced player on the bench. And I think there's something we can cut out of that leaf, if that's proper English, and learn something there. I mean, having Bongani Zungu in and around the squad is a good thing. I think he should be around 30 years old right now. But then you've got Tebogo Mokoena, who's playing in there. If he doesn't move abroad, I mean, he's going to be playing in that midfield for probably the next 5 years, right? And in 5 years, he'll only be turning something like 32 years old. That's when he's going to be reaching where Miguel Tim already is. And he'll still be younger than what Thabang Munari already is. In 5 years, he's going to be still younger than what Makehleni Makaula already is. And I'm thinking in those 5 years, if Tebogo Mokoena plays in that midfield for those 5 years, where is Mamelodi Sundowns going to be in terms of, the solidity of of their team. And that's something that I think that we've got to be thinking about, especially in the summer. I think this summer is where we make those cutthroat, brutal decisions to go, all right, let's start building for this future. In fact, I don't think we start thinking about it this summer. I think this is the time right now to be thinking about it. We've already lost the league. I think we start playing with the midfield that we want to play with going forward. I mean, I don't think any of our 8 players in our midfield right now is a bad player at all. Some players are better than others. For example, I, for one, think that Ndabaiteto Ndlondlo, who also isn't a young chap anymore, by the way, he's already 29 years old this year. So if you think about that midfield, you see that there's a lot of sort of these guys are progressing in age, and we really need to be thinking about who to play, because he's the next player that I think is more of a regular starter of all the players that are at Pirates, compared to Talent Mbata, compared to Goodman Musele, compared to Spelo Baloni. Ndlondlo is more of that person that I trust in that midfield. I mean, with asterisks around Talent Mbata, because he's been very impressive every time that I've seen him. But, you know, Ndabaiteto Ndlondlo is that next guy whom you think, okay, we can build our midfield around him for the next few years, but you'd then be talking about sort of 3 or so years as well, because he's also 29 this year, you know, and very soon he'll also be getting on to those 30s and 33 and that kind of thing. And so I think this is the time right now for Orlando Pirates to start initiating Talent Mbata if he's going to be our midfield for the next in our midfield for the coming years. This is the time to bring back Goodman Musele, who's good age, 25 years old, to start playing him in that midfield. I think that's going to be good for us. This is not to say that you completely cut off these guys. Again, I want to repeat that point. This does not mean that you completely cut off Thabang Munari, you completely cut off Makhehleni Makala, you completely cut off Miguel Tim. I think they still can benefit and they can still contribute in the team. I very well think so. But I think their contribution in the sense of them being our star players is detrimental to the continuity of the club and sustainable success for Orlando Pirates, because we've got to have the core of the team playing for a number of years together. And you can't have Makhehleni Makala still playing for Orlando Pirates for the next few years, because he's already 35. In the next few years, he's going to be 37, 38. That's just not healthy, you know, especially if his partner is also 35 or 32. You've got to be playing these young players with them and build your team around those guys who are younger and have still got some time to play, have still got some room to develop, right? That's the gist of this whole video. So if you hear nothing else in this video, the gist of this video is that sustainable success has to be built around people that can still develop and have still got some guarantee of playing for the next few years. And I don't think that's possible with 3 of our players. I think 3 of our midfielders right now, maybe one of them can go for 2 more years, you know, and that's arguable who you think it is, but I think you can't bet on all 3 of them going for 3 more years in that midfield. And so if you can't bet on them going for 3 more years, then you've got to think about, okay, who's the replacement, right? And you don't replace them in 3 years, you start the replacement process now. And this is the gist of this whole video. This is what I want you to get. I mean, the details of it, whether you get them or not, it's cool. We can argue those things. But I think this is the gist, and I think that's something we can agree upon, that sustainable success is going to have to be built on players that can still give us a number of years in the midfield of Orlando Pirates. And so, I mean, I look at the fact that who then would we what would we do? That's my question. What do we do from today, which is the 22nd of March, I think. I'm not sure when you're going to see this. At the time of recording, it's the 22nd of March. I hope you see this on the 22nd of March, but you might see this, you're probably going to see this at a later date. But sort of from this point going forward, what do we do? This is what I want us to think about. And, you know, I want to propose a few solutions. One of those solutions I said is premature. I'm going to do a video on it particularly to speak about that. So be on the lookout for that. For me, it is to shift our formation and change formation and play a different formation, because we've got a couple of number 10s who are of good age. So obviously Karim Kimvidi is only 22 years old, and then you've got Patrick Maswanganyi, who's only 25 years old. And so you've got a couple of players there who, if playing in those number 8 positions, can still go for, years and years and still develop. However, I'm going to talk about that in due time. Let's just say we are playing the 4-2-3-1 system. The solution that I do want to propose is that, okay, firstly, I want to look at the contract situation. So we've got Makhehleni Makhala. I mean, there's been talk in sort of since January about possibly, extending his contract. I don't know where that talk is at the moment, how far they are with that kind of talk. But his contract is expiring June 2024. This coming June, the contract of Makhehleni Makhala is expiring. And then you've got Tim's contract, which I don't know about, but I do imagine that it's not expiring this coming June. And then you've got Fortune Makaringe, another one in that midfield, who's going to be 31 this May. You've got his contract expiring in June of 2024, yes. And then you've got Munari's contract, which is also expiring in June of 2024. However, his contract has the clause that they can extend it for 1 more year. So they've got an option to extend till 2025. And by my understanding is that the option to extend is on both sides. So the club can decide to extend his contract. I don't know what the clause is in detail, whether it's number of games that have been played, contributions, whatever. I don't know the exact clause, but I do know there's an option to extend on the club side, that they might want to keep him for 1 more year till 2025. And we know that's been the case since like 2021. They've just been increasing Munari's contract with an extra year, and they just keep going like that. But there's also that option on the player side. So if Munari decides, by my understanding with his contract right now, if he decides to extend 1 more year, then he can activate that clause as well, so that his contract will only expire in 2025. And then you've got Ndawaithetho Ndlondlo's contract, which also expires. I think Ndawaithetho Ndlondlo's contract expires in 2025 as well, June 2025. And then you've got Goodman Musele's as well, which is June 2025. And then you've got Spelo Baloni, his expires in June of 2026. Then you've got Thailand Mbata's contract, which expires in June of 2024. And we've already spoken about that. Pirates will then have to submit a formal bid to SuperSport United if they want to keep him at the club. So here's my solution, which is a hard one, because honestly, it's really hard for me. I think of the 4 30-year-olds at the club, I think we've got to release 2 of them, at the least. So I'd be okay with us releasing 3 and going from there. But I think at the least we've got to release 2. And who do I think we should release after everything I've said, with contracts and things of that nature? I think you've got to then, as much as I like him and I think he's made such a great contribution to the club, especially recently, and he just seems like a very likable guy as well, just generally. And I loved when he was signed, but I think Fortune Makaringe's contract has got to be allowed to run out this season. In fact, I thought that was going to happen last season. I thought they were going to release him. We kept him another year. Obviously, the reasons again might be just the coach wanting him in and around the place still. As we're sort of building, you want to keep these figures that are sort of influential in the club, so that the young guys, because I do think we've been in a transitionary stage for some years now. We signed Oki and Spisi. That's a new looking defense for us, coming from Hlatswayo and those guys. So you want to have some old heads, the Vincent Pules, in the place to sort of initiate these guys, make them know what it is to be an Orlando Pirates player. So those are some of the things that affect these decisions, and rightfully so. I think you don't want a situation where you've got a whole new 33 players coming into Orlando Pirates and then suddenly having to take responsibility like that. I think Manchester United is a good example of that, where you've got someone like Harry Maguire, and you guys, if you support Manchester United, you're going to kill me. He comes from Leicester and suddenly he's the leader at Manchester United, and I think there's a lot of detriment with that kind of thing. So you do want those guys who have been at the club, the Maela, Marco, who understand what it was like, having taken that baton from people like Happy Jele and Ntsigelelo Nyauza and everyone who knows what it's been. And those guys got that baton from people before them, Makola and those guys. And you want to keep people like Erasmus in and around the club, because they just set a level, they just set a bar and an understanding in the place of what it is to be at Orlando Pirates, right? So these guys, when they come, they're Mufukengs, they understand exactly what the requirements are, that behavioral-wise and quality-wise, performance-wise, that kind of thing. So, I mean, I'm saying that to say that, I think it could have been a good decision to keep Makaringa an extra year, but I think just going forward now, he's the first person that I would say, if his contract is expiring in 2024 of June, I don't see the necessity in improving it, because he just then fills up that body where, that space can be freed up for these younger players to take that shirt and grip it and get those minutes. Those minutes don't have to be shared amongst people like, those minutes can help someone else develop. So he's the first one, I think. And my second one, so I think Tim is going to be hard to let go. Not only because he's very important for us, because most of them are, I think Makhehle Makaula is and Thabang Munari is. But I think Tim is going to be harder to let go, because I imagine that his contract doesn't expire now. So that would mean we either have to release him for free, or we have to end his contract, terminate his contract. I don't see Orlando Pirates doing that. I don't see Pirates terminating the contract of Miguel Tim. So I think Tim is going to definitely stay. And so it then is either Makhehle Makaula or Thabang Munari, both of whom are, in their 30s again and have got contracts expiring this June. Now, looking at just purely the contractual situation, I think it makes more sense to release Makhehle Makaula, for the reason that Munari's contract, he's someone who might choose to stay. And so if you release Munari and you commit to keeping Makhehle Makaula, then Munari might decide to stay, and then you've got a situation where you enter the season with 3 of these guys again, right? But if you commit to saying, okay, because of Munari's contractual clause, then let's keep him and let's allow the contract of Makhehle Makaula to expire and not extend it, which is going to be said after only a year and a half. But I mean, having signed him at age 33, Pirates will have been prepared for that, right? Because we've only signed him in the past January, not this January, but the previous one. So they signed him for a year and a half. And so upon the expiry of this contract, I think Pirates have got to be cutthroat. Although I really like him, I really like Makhehle Makaula, what he does for us in that midfield. But I think it's going to be hard to let go of Munari and Tim. I just think because of that, then they've got to say, you know what, we're starting this process again, which we already did in the defense. We released Jele, released Tlhatswayo, released Nyauza all at once, and we brought in Sbisi and Oki and started this new look defense. I think now what needs to happen is that midfield rebuild now, and that's going to have to start with releasing, for me, at least 2 players. In fact, I would have us release 3, but I think that's going to be hard, something that's going to be hard to do just because of the importance of these players. So I think 2, and then maybe do one next season and then 1 the following season. So for me, this is what I'm proposing. I'm proposing that, I beg your pardon, we release Makhehle Makaula, hard as that may be, and I can already see the comments. Release Makhehle Makaula and Fortune Makaringa this winter transfer. Let their contract expire. So you're not selling them, their contracts are already expiring. Don't extend them this winter, and then next season do Munari. Let his also, don't give him another option to extend. He's been a great servant. Let it expire next season. Also, you're not playing Munari as a regular next season, by the way. And then the following season, maybe do Tim. When he then turns 34 years old, then maybe you can go from there. At that point, Nabaiteto Ndlondlo will be 31, 32 years old. He'll be a senior player, a very experienced player at that point. And you're going to have Baloni with 2 more years under his belt if he's going to do well and develop. Or you're going to have Talent Mbata with 2 more years of experience. And then I think just going from there, we can start, well, firstly, I think that some of those attacking midfield options that we do have at the club are going to have to be, integrated into a more sort of number 8 position instead of a number 10. Someone like Kimvidi, I see not as a number 10 actually. I see him as a number 8, as someone who starts out deep and goes forward, than as a number 10 behind the striker kind of player. Even Maswanganye, I think he's going to have to morph his game into that. I think he's got the game intelligence to do that, where we could actually play with a single pivot and 2 number 8s instead of this 2 6s and 1 10. And so, yeah, that's my something that I propose. And I think you've got someone like Musele who can go from Chippa United and come back to Orlando Pirates and take over the reins of someone like Makehleni. This is not to say he's at that level or that quality, but I do think that there's something there. And we know that the coach trusted him. We know that he's someone that he used to play a lot. And so I think we could do that. That's something we could do. We could bring back Musele. I think Talent Mbata looks like a promising someone as well. I think with more years and more experience, he's someone that, playing alongside these players that he's already playing alongside right now, can take a thing or two, but also his quality, just his own quality. I think he's got quality. I think so. I definitely think so. I think he's someone that looks like he's got the potential to take over those reins as well. And then, Nabaiteto Ndlondlo, obviously, I like him. I think he's another one who, not necessarily playing as a 6, he can play as an 8 alongside maybe Maswanganye, Kimvidi, even Dlamini, I think, can play there as well. So that's what I want to say. That's something that I want us to. I think this is going to have to be a brutal summer from Orlando Pirates. I think if Pirates goes the direction of, again, keeping Makehleni Makaula, Munari, Tim, again, I think then we don't see a progression in the squad, because the next summer we might have to offload 3 and then bring in a new 3. So I think it would be a nice gradual one if we release 2 this summer at least, and then let go of another one the following, and then let go of another one the following summer in 2026, the following winter, I beg your pardon, in 2026, and then be plugging players into it like that, just gradually finding the next one who comes in and joins Mbata, who joins Musele, who joins Ndlondlo and Baloni in that midfield, right? So that's something that I propose. I want to hear what you guys think, especially if you guys think I'm nuts, I'm going completely crazy, and what you guys think and sort of what's your vision of this Orlando Pirates midfield. I would like to hear those things. Just put it in the comment section and let's have the conversation. Let me leave it here before I go on for too long. Up the mighty Bucks. Cheers. Well, I hope you enjoyed that video from Talking Buccaneers. If you did, please hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with all our future content.